Hi, everybody. I'm Selena Rezvani, and you're joining Women and Work Culture. What are we all about? Well, we are about leveling the playing field at work and helping women rise. And today we are talking about how to be that inclusive leader, okay? Regardless of your job title, regardless of your level in your organization. So I have admired our guest today who's joining us for a long time and followed her. I think she's really the perfect person to be exploring this topic with us today. Welcome, Dr. Shirley Davis.
Hello, Selena. Wonderful to be here. Thank you for this honor. And hello to all of my powerful, brilliant colleagues, sisters, and friends.
Yay! How's that for a greeting? I love it. We're so happy to have you. And we're so happy to see our community here. Saman from India, welcome. Michelle in Philadelphia, Anissa in Tampa Bay, Aytekin from Ankara, Turkey. How awesome. We're so happy to see you all. If you have, isn't that cool?
That's amazing.
If you haven't already, drop us a comment and let us know where you are on the map. Wow, hello from Madrid. So cool. I want to give you all some of the inside scoop on our wonderful guest today, some of the amazing background she brings to the table. So Dr. Shirley Davis is an accomplished corporate executive. She's an award-winning global workforce expert with over 20 years of experience in senior leadership roles. So she knows what she's talking about with this subject. And her last role was actually VP of Global Diversity and Inclusion for SHRM. That's Society of Human Resources Management. It's the go-to in our field for human resources kind of intelligence. She is a former Miss American United States, a best-selling author, and an acclaimed speaker. That's actually how I first found out about her after watching a really terrific speech. She teaches 4 popular courses on LinkedIn Learning, which is a really cool connection point for us. And we can't wait to dive in today and ask some questions of Dr. Davis. As we do it, will you share your questions? Please, we love your questions. They are a highlight of the show. So let us know, as you think about leading inclusively, what's on your mind? What are some of the tripwires or the accelerators you want to learn more about? And hello, Andrea, too, from Long Island, New York. Love it. So, Dr. Davis, I would love to start by asking you some of your own story, specifically what is meaningful to you. What gets you excited about this idea of inclusive leadership?
Well, it's for me very personal, not only because I consider myself a leader and I know that that skill is underutilized and certainly needed, but it's also because I think that we need greater and more effective leadership in our organizations and certainly in our country and around the world. Leadership is key and critical because it's what brings out the best in people. It brings out the best work, the best thinking, the best attitudes. So it's important to me when we talk about inclusive leadership, because then it means that you are able to embrace the differences of others, but you're also able to bring out the best and the most awesome potential that they have. Inclusive leadership is about recognizing that people come to the table, they come to the workplace, they show up every day, but they look different. They come in different shapes, sizes, colors, ethnicities, genders, religious beliefs and faiths, and all of that. And inclusive leadership then allows all of that to be leveraged in a way that brings value, transformation, great output, wonderful results, and sustained success.
I love that. It's the ultimate enabler, isn't it? When you think about inclusive leadership, right? And I hate to say it, but I think many of us have experienced and felt the opposite of what
Yeah,
that's like too. What
that's
it's, you
right.
know,
You
when
know what,
it's not
Selena, and
present.
I would say in that same vein, you're exactly right. For me, inclusive leadership is key and critical because I have been one of those victims of poor leadership, ineffective leadership, and even toxic leadership. And having worked in human resources for nearly 30 years, I've seen more bad leaders, ineffective leaders than I've seen really good leaders. And if I think about over my career, the number of great and effective leaders I've worked for, I can count them on one hand. So we
Mm,
need
they
more
do.
leaders.
They do stand out when we have them as exceptional. And I
Mhm.
think we have a great question here from Andrea, who has a question for you. What advice would you give to up and coming diversity, equity, inclusion leaders?
Oh wow. Now, see, I I didn't grow up wanting to be a diversity, equity, and inclusion officer. It found me, and that's how I think life and sometimes our callings and our purpose, it finds us, and we have to accept the door that opens. But I would give you the advice of, first of all, you need to have a diverse network so that you can bring various perspectives and you can tap into your network to be able to give you greater insights and understanding and give you different ideas. That's helped me a lot to be able to tap into a very diverse network of people all over the world with different cultures, different backgrounds, different ways of thinking, different personalities. That helps me to be well-rounded. It also helps me to be grounded enough to know I don't know everything there is to know. You also have to have a level of inquisitiveness. You want to be able to ask questions. You want to be a student of life. You want to be a student of culture and a student of humanity, and being willing to recognize that we don't have all of the answers, but when we surround ourselves with the right people, we can. The last thing I would say, well, a couple of other things. You definitely want to get the right level of education and understanding. You know, it's like driving a car without a license. If you're going to be in this work and practicing in this work, you really do need to get some level of licensing, certification, and get some real good grounding. Now, I will plug because I have a great certificate of mastery course, and I literally teach it because of that very reason. When I came in, there wasn't a lot of great education. So I had to learn by making mistakes and jumping in there and sort of figuring it out on my own. But now, having been a 4-time Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer, I feel like I've got a lot of real life experiences and some success under my belt.
These are such good tips. So, just to reiterate what Dr. Davis said, for all of us, check your network. How
Yeah.
diverse is your network, right? That's where a lot of your ideas, your sounding board's going to come from. How inquisitive are you? You don't have to be born knowing all this.
That's right.
Okay. And the education piece, I think these are wonderful reminders. And hello and welcome, Chini, and also Valerine from DFW Metroplex. Happy to see you. We have a great question from Michelle, a student of one of your courses, Inclusive Leadership, who's saying, you say at one point in your course, you manage projects, but you lead people. That's striking. Is that something you can elaborate on for us?
I sure can. Can I tell you the number of leaders that have been put into positions simply because they did a really good job of managing projects and programs and big initiatives and managing great sales. And so they got promoted or they got allocated to take on this role that required them to now have direct reports or to really be able to work directly with people. And I have seen people put in those positions that had no experience in leading others. See, when you manage projects, managing projects is about, the data, it's really rote and routine. It's about being methodical. It's about checking in and making sure it stays on time. But it doesn't require you to have heart and emotion that you put into it. So when I say you manage projects, but you have to lead people. People want to be led. Great leaders build other leaders. Great leaders engender followers. Great leaders bring out the best in people. They know how to talk to people. They know how to provide coaching and direction and feedback. They know how to gauge the atmosphere. They know how to treat you as a person, as a unique individual. And when you're managing projects, you're not thinking about that because it really is about this way, this way, this way. It's very methodical and routine. seen, but we have to treat people where they are, and we have to be able to lead people to bring out the best in them. And that's very different than managing projects.
That's awesome advice, especially because oftentimes no one's going to tell you that. You
That's
know,
right.
like you said, you've been promoted because you're great at tactics, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
But if you try to now lead a team
That's
using
right.
tactics, you're going to be toast.
That's right.
And people don't always tell us that outright.
Yeah.
We have a different great question from Suman, who's asking Dr. Davis, how can women be elevated from male-dominated society across the world? Do you have some thoughts on that?
Yes, I do. I talk about that all the time. I actually wrote the book called The Seat. How do you get invited to the table when you are overperforming but undervalued? And that means undervalued even at the table. That means undervalued in your organizations and not necessarily being seen and recognized and noticed, even though you're present. Even though you're visible at the table, you can still be invisible. So some of the things that I've done, and that's why I had to talk about it, because being a woman and then being a person of color and some of my other intersectional identities made me a minority in a lot of different ways and made me the only one in a lot of those instances. I had to build my confidence. I had to come to grips with what was my purpose, because when I found my purpose, I then found my power. I found my passion, and those things positioned me in order to be productive. You hear all those P's in there, but that's really right. I literally had to understand what was my why. And when you understand that, that gives you a level of confidence you didn't have. I think the other part about this is being willing to have the courage to speak up, to know when to, take a stand on something, to be willing to insert your opinion, your ideas, not to shrink, not to play small, not to think, I think in small ways of yourself. One of my greatest mentors told me he said, you got to get out of your head and you got to step into your greatness, because a lot of times we can be our biggest critics and we can be our biggest enemies, but we have to recognize and speak to ourselves that we are wonderful, we are powerful, we are courageous, and we can speak up and have the right and the ability to make a difference. So that's what I was able to do. The other thing was, you got to make sure that you learn, the business, learn the leaders, build your brand and the credibility, and build a reputation so that people get to know who you are, and then they come to respect who you are as well. And the other thing for me is, I always stayed in front of my messaging. I tried to be the one that I let people know who I was, what I did, and why they should care, what value I added. And so you have to educate people on who you are.
That's such a good point, right? Because you have to be the world's leading expert on your value. No one else is going to
brand you. Yes, brand you.
Exactly, right? But we sometimes do think, well, surely they know, I'm working hard, I'm doing good, where I've been shining. And often, my old saying to people is, managers have short memories. They don't know, they're busy. They don't know what you're doing, let alone where you're sparkling and shining.
You know what, Selena, and the other point to that, and I think you just hit something else, is that we as women don't do as good of a job of tooting our own horn without blowing it. Right. And so we have to be willing and able, just like our male counterparts, is to be able to sell our value, our worth, and our results, and do it unapologetically, not doing it with hesitation and saying, you know what, I don't know if this is right, or I'm not sure if this is correct. I see so many women do that with a disclaimer in front of their statement or their idea. Don't do that. Don't dismiss yourself. Don't play small.
That's right. And if you ever want training on that, become an entrepreneur, because you need to sell yourself, right? Yeah. And your skills, and why pick me, why hire me. And you need to do it, without your voice quaking.
That's right.
So I think this is brilliant advice. We have a question from Anissa, who would like to know, do you have some ideas around creating those safe spaces at work? It's really hard for companies to do it right. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and I've been doing a lot of that. Thanks, Anissa, for that question, because obviously, as we have leaned in even more over the last 9 to 10 months following the George Floyd murder, we have been working with organizations all over the world to do just that. How do we have more courageous conversations? How do we lean in to learn more? And how do we create safe spaces where people feel comfortable to share their lived experiences and to be their true authentic self? And you've got to, first of all, make sure that you're coming to the conversation with the right intention and the right motive. It's also important to not judge. Come with, without, sending that message of like, I'm assuming certain things about you. Come with a clear and open mind so that you would be willing to hear. The other thing is what we hear all the time about, 7 habits of highly effective people is this is about listening to understand versus to respond. And when people are sharing with you their experiences, their stories, it's their story. So it's not up to us to judge it, to get into a debate, or to have, to try to dismiss any of it or to minimize. I always say 3 things we don't do. Don't minimize, don't trivialize, and don't try to marginalize the person's experience. It's who they are. So the other thing is acceptance over agreement. You may not always agree with people, but a safe space allows people to share without feeling like there is retaliation or consequences or judgment. But we have to be willing to allow them to share their truth and not suspend and to suspend that judgment. Lastly, what I'll say is let's practice the platinum rule. I know we learned a lot, the golden rule of treat people the way you want to be treated. But when we create safe spaces, we recognize that people are different. They learn messages differently. They've been socialized. They come from all parts of the world and various cultures and beliefs. So we have to practice the platinum rule of treating people the way they want to be treated. And that means asking, suspending our own ideals, but also being willing to ask questions and being willing to learn.
Yes, I love it. I think we've all felt before when somebody was listening to understand versus listening to, can you please hurry up and finish your answer kind of way, right? We know the difference.
Yes.
We know it when it's there. So remember that, to generously listen, to understand. The other thing I wanted to say is just, a don't do, I think we can add to this list is don't ask people to over verify their story.
That's right.
Like if you hear it, I tell people sometimes, I get asked sometimes if I am my kid's nanny because they're white presenting. And so people in a playground will say, oh, da, 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 and you're the nanny, right? I say, no, they're my kids. And sometimes when I tell that story, people, well, are you sure? Is it, did they misunderstand? Could it have been that? And I'm like, listen, it happens.
That's right. It does. And that begins insensitivities. And I'm a big believer too, Selena, that, most people have biases and not realize that they have them. All of us are hardwired for bias. And we make statements that come from sometimes a place of, let's say from a good place, but they don't recognize that it can be insensitive or incendiary or even illegal to say certain things to people, especially if you're a leader in the workplace. So you're right. Those kinds of comments can be marginalizing and trivializing and really are considered a microaggression.
Yeah, I think so too. So the key is, if you're receiving the story, don't deny it. Don't defend it. You don't need to over verify. You can listen, you can say, can I ask you more? Can I ask you more about that? Or thank you for sharing that, right? These are so great. These are wonderful tools. I have a question for you that I want to ask.
Sure.
We tend to think of leadership for these few special unicorns, who have what it takes to somehow lead the rest of us. Do you think all of us have traits of leadership?
I do believe that. I believe that we are both born with, and we can also develop the specific leadership skills that are needed to be a success. So for example, some things you can't train, Selena. For a leader, we can train you on how to make great presentations. We can train you on how to give coaching and feedback. We can train you on how to make better decisions and even how to be a good communicator. But let me tell you what we can't train you on. We can't train you on honesty and integrity and character and a good, strong work ethic, right? We can't train you on those things. So I believe that based on how we are raised and socialized at a very, very early age, we have those in us, right? And I believe that innately there's good in all of us. That means good leadership traits as well. But I believe over time that we have to develop and foster those kinds of things and nurture leadership skills to help us to be more effective. I know for me, I have some of those very core specific leadership traits that I just talked about. But over time, I have learned how to be a more effective leader. And that comes from everything from how do I communicate with people? How do I treat people in the way that they want to be treated? It comes in understanding, how to bring out the best in others, how to motivate others. So those things I think can marry both well, what you have inside, but also how you can develop and grow those things over time to be more effective.
Awesome. Yeah, it's that growth mindset, right? For all of us, that it's not so much the destination. It's that you keep cultivating this and trying to do it a little bit better and trying to be a little more open and humble as you lead. I know I take inspiration from some of the best practices out there. Are you seeing some things that really progressive companies are doing around inclusive leadership?
Yeah, actually, I get a chance to work with a number of companies, big, small, medium, as well as nonprofits and for-profits, and across all of the board, right? There are some companies that are really doing this well. Let me tell you what that looks like. It looks like that, and here I'm giving you real examples of some of my clients and others that I study, is that boards of directors are truly bought into this. They're committed and they're saying, hey, we want to do our own work on our board. We want to make sure that our board governance is tight. We want to make sure that we've got the demographics on our board that reflects the company that we serve, as well as the customers and even the surrounding, demographics, right? The region. So that's important, boards. Then you want to make sure at the senior executive level that you've got not just support, but you have commitment and engagement, because support says, oh, that sounds like a great idea. Well, of course we value diversity. Of course we want to be inclusive, but they're not doing anything about it. They're not allocating resources. They're not speaking up. They're not putting out messaging, and you don't see them. So commitment and engagement is something I'm seeing more and more of. I am even thrilled to see more companies, especially in this last year, being more committed and focused, and their dollars and resources are coming together with what their mouths are saying, right? And so they're investing in education and leadership, and they're doing diversity and inclusion and equity audits, and they're doing assessments, and they want to know where they are and where they have gaps and opportunities. And they're saying, we want to make set a goal and set some targets, and we want to make sure that we get more women. We want to get more people of color and other underrepresented groups. So I'm seeing those as best practices. I'm seeing companies now saying, we're going to reach out and we're going to be more targeted in where we recruit. We're going to cast our net broader, and we're not just going to go to the top 10 business schools or just go to the ones that all of our executives are, coming from as alma maters, but we're going to now go to the areas where we haven't been. We're going to go to the HBCUs, or the historically Black colleges and universities. We're going to go to other companies and colleges where they have a large minority population. We're going to partner with organizations that have more women and have more representation of those that we don't have. And the other thing I'm loving, companies also putting their money where their mouth is by investing more in Black-owned and women-owned businesses. I have seen that uptick like I've never seen before. And so those are some of the things I'm saying. And when you talk about even greater levels of inclusion, I'm seeing strategies change. I'm seeing them putting in global inclusion councils. I'm seeing the CEOs being a real voice and a real part of some of the work that's being done there. And I'm seeing them hold their leaders, their people managers, accountable for some of the work that they need to do around being more inclusive.
Yes, these are really great things to hear, and I think heartening and exciting. And, I think one thing we as individuals can do is keep, holding companies accountable to keep that momentum up and not let it, kind of sleep, right? I want to ask a little bit of a different question here. I think it's a great question. Anissa wants to talk about those mistakes that can sometimes happen. There's so much fear right now around what if I make a mistake, right? There's cancel culture. There's
Yeah.
like, what if I ruin myself because I say the wrong thing?
Yeah.
If someone's in a moment and they ask a question or they make a comment and it does offend a person, any thoughts about how to handle that with
Yes.
grace?
Let me give you my personal story because look, I've been in HR most all of my career. I've been a chief diversity officer. So guess what? I don't know everything there is to know. I have a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge, but I'm not the expert in that regard, meaning that I'm perfect. So I have even made some of those mistakes, and I've even made some of them more recently. But here's the reality. I am that kind of person that's authentic and transparent enough that I say to them, if I make a mistake or I say something that's insensitive, let me know. If there's something else or some other way I could phrase that, let me know. So just this week, it's funny that you asked, Selena. Just this week, one of my clients, after a meeting was over, said, "Hey, would you mind staying on the call a little bit longer? I just wanted to share something with you." And guess what? He said, you were in, as you were talking to you were talking to the rest of our team, one of the things you said you were going to do is you were going to take all this information and you were going to go back and you were going to powwow. Right? You're going to powwow with your team. He said, I am Native American. And he said, and that has a real negative connotation to it. And I had no idea. And you know what I said to him? Thank you for letting me know that. I had no idea. I owned it. And I said, you know what? This is all a learning process. And I said, for me, this is a wonderful teachable moment. And I appreciate that you took the time and trusted me enough to tell me that. And guess what? It is corrected right now. So when you make those faux pas and you say those things that you don't even know are landing the wrong way with people, own it. Apologize, make it a teachable moment, and go forward and not do it again. So that's how we do it. We have to cut people slack. We have to assume positive intent that they didn't say it to be malicious. They just didn't know. And so this becomes an opportunity for us to educate one another, but let's assume positive intent.
That's really helpful. And, all I could think about after you just shared that story was when you go back to work with that person again, you've also told that person something about your brand, which is that you can hear feedback, right? Yeah. So back to the earlier point around your brand and how you teach other people about you and the value you bring, teaching them, I can hear feedback, I am coachable, I'm open to these things. I think that's a great moment. Thank you for sharing that with us. Yeah. We have a tradition here as we wrap up for our final question, which is to ask our experts, do you have a parting truth bomb for us you want us to keep in mind as we try to get this inclusive leadership thing right?
A parting truth bomb. Well, you know what? The truth and the reality is that people don't leave bad jobs. They leave bad cultures and they leave bad leaders. And leaders who don't know how to be inclusive alienate top talent. They alienate great thoughts and they alienate people's experience and their expertise that they can truly bring to the organization. So I would say as leaders that if you are a leader and nobody is following you, you're just taking a walk. You want to be the kind of leader that people follow. You want to be the kind of leader that builds other leaders. And that means you're not threatened and intimidated by other people who are smarter than you. I'm one of those leaders. And I would say to you, the truth bomb is get people around you who are smarter than you. If you're the smartest one in your group is too small. Thank you.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Davis, for your message. And honestly, the way you deliver it too is so powerful. I've said before, it takes a lot of courage to be the person challenging leaders and cultures to do better and to be that mirror that you're holding up to them. So thank you so much for your work. We need your message. In the show notes, everyone, you're going to see links to follow Shirley Davis and see her wonderful message, Dr. Davis. And I hope you won't forget to check out her wonderful LinkedIn learning courses. You're going to see a link to that as well. I hope you'll stay in touch with me too. Subscribe to my new LinkedIn newsletter, which is called Quick Confidence. I was super honored recently. LinkedIn called it one of its 4 favorite newsletters. So please do subscribe and stay in touch that way. I want to thank you again, Dr. Davis, for your wonderful pearls of wisdom. Thank you to this amazing community of smarties. We loved having you along. Remember this, the world isn't changed by people who just sort of care. You know, be the change maker, right? Don't wait for other people to do it. Be that inclusive leader. Thank you so much, everybody. And stay well, stay healthy, and lead on.